Thank you all for being here. If you're here, you're probably here for the Advocacy Through the Lens of Racial Justice event with EMO. So my name's Aaron Salzman. I'm the Climate Advocacy Associate at Ecumenical Ministries Oregon in our public policy team. We're really excited to have you here with us tonight to discuss what it means to be partnering with folks to advance racial justice in our state. Tonight we'll be talking about some of EMO's public policy priorities with my colleague Britt Conroy, which he'll share. And then we'll have a really great set of panelists who will be speaking on some of EMO's public policy priorities and their work in these areas as well, and its connection with racial justice. And then finally, we'll actually get a chance to work on this ourselves by doing a little demonstration and then actually calling our legislators, just leaving voicemails on behalf of these policy priorities. So really excited for the night. We've got a packed agenda. So real quick before we dive in, just want to remind everyone of some Zoom etiquette. So please stay on mute whenever possible, unless you're coming off to ask a question or, when appropriate. I definitely encourage you to use the chat feature. EMO staff will be monitoring that, answering questions in the chat. So definitely take advantage of that. And then one of the things I always like to do, if you're comfortable, we invite you to stay on video just to create more of a sense of community because that can be hard in these times, as we know. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Britt Conroy, to dive into some of EMO's public policy priorities.
I think I actually get to go next. My name is Sharice Bach, and I am going to help us to become present here this evening and aware of the spiritual work of advocacy that we're doing together tonight. So I want us to think about this work and why we're particularly here. So we're here for a gathering called Advocacy Through the Lens of Racial Justice. And although we're in many ways just a normal group of interested citizens, we're attending this particular gathering because we're people of faith. I'll venture a guess that most of you here hold your faith tradition as a central aspect of who you are, and it influences the way you move through the world. So why are we, a group of people of faith, interested in advocacy? And why are we particularly interested in the racial justice aspects of our collective political action? I want you to hold that question for a moment. Why are you, as a person of faith, concerned about advocacy and its implications for racial justice? You don't need to answer that out loud. Just meditate on it for a moment. For those of us who are Christians, we have some guidance in our sacred text about these things. So I'll point out specifically Galatians 3:28, which says, "There's no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male or female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus." While the concept of race wasn't around when the Bible was written, the concepts of equality, justice, and freedom definitely were around. And disparities due to ethnicity, gender, and economic status were present. The early followers of Jesus lived out Jesus' message of good news through radical equality. That was good news for the poor, for women, and people who did not have citizenship status in the Roman Empire. They formed communities where all could belong and have their needs met, where all experienced love and care. And Romans 13:8-10 says, "Owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, love your neighbor as yourself." Love does no wrong to neighbor, therefore love is the fulfilling of the law. And that is our work, right? To live out the law of love fully, to make sure our neighbors are treated with the same love, respect, and true justice as ourselves, to create laws that help us to do no harm, and instead that offer us every opportunity to live out love. Right before this, Romans 13, 1-7 explains a little bit about the Christian's relationship to the state. In my own denomination, which is Quaker, we talk about the need to speak truth to power, to make sure that our governing authorities are instituting laws that are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad, as it says in Romans 13:3, and that our governments are acting as God's servants for all of our good, verse 4. We're to give respect, honor, and taxes to those to whom they are due, to those in authority who are helping our societies live out the law of love that God requires. That is the work we are doing when we're doing advocacy as people of faith. We're speaking truth to power. We're calling on our elected officials to enact and enforce laws that help us to love our neighbors. In this time and place, unfortunately, not all of our laws help us to love all of our neighbors. And racism was baked into many of the systems and structures that make up our society and our laws. We're also instructed to pray for those who have taken on roles of authority and leadership in 1 Timothy 2. So please join me in holding in your heart the elected officials who are charged with making our society's laws. Pray for them, that their consciences may be pricked, that they will experience overwhelming empathy, that they will open their hearts and their spirits to recognizing the harm that laws have done in the past, particularly to communities of color. Pray that they will be able to glimpse the vision of the beloved community Jesus was speaking about. And pray that you also may be opened to live out the law of love to all your neighbors. Take a moment to say those prayers in your heart together. Amen. Thank you, everyone, for joining in that time of prayer and holding our officials to that law of love. I'll hand it over to Michael Ellick for our next portion this evening.
Thank you, Sharice, for the prayers this morning. Thanks to all of you for joining us. I'm Reverend Michael Ellick. I am the Public Engagement Director here at Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon. Tonight, I'm joined not only by Aaron and by Sharice, but by Britt, who I'll introduce in just a moment. We'll also be joined by colleagues from the Coalition of Communities of Color, the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, IRCO, the Native American Youth and Family Center, NAYA, as well as our Oregon State Senator Lou Frederick. I want to just frame some of our time together this evening. We know full well, working with church members around the state, that discussions surrounding public policy, legislative procedures, and state budgets can often seem really intimidating with obscure language and esoteric expressions, making it difficult for people who don't spend all of their time in policy spaces to really appreciate what it is that's being talked about. And some of that obscuration may even be by design. We certainly know that not everyone has the privilege to enter into these conversations, and not everyone wants everyone to enter into these conversations, as we are reminded, given what's happening currently in Georgia and around the country. So historically, it has been a very limited segment of society that gets to actually participate in what becomes the law of the land. We know this. We know how people of color have been deliberately and systemically excluded. And this plays out as a dire picture of inequity along racial and ethnic lines in this state and throughout our country. I want to just name a few representative examples of this, and I'll put them in the chat screen as well for us to reflect on. One is Oregonians of color are twice as likely to live in poverty as white Oregonians. And oh, did I hit return on that? There we go. Highways and major arterials in this country are more likely to be built next to or built to separate neighborhoods with greater populations of people of color, leading to pollution, heat islands, blight, they say. In Portland, the police arrest Black individuals at a per capita rate that is 4.3 times higher than white people. Likewise, chronic health conditions such as asthma, diabetes, hypertension, all have higher prevalence among African American, Latino, and Native American communities. And there's so many other examples, but I'll end with what the Oregon Center for Public Policy reported last fall. Oregonians of color disproportionately bear the brunt of the housing affordability crisis, and they are more likely to be renters and have lower incomes due to discriminatory policies, both current, past, and present, of course. These are representative examples that are, of course, just the tip of a much larger iceberg. But I bring them up here for us at the top to remind ourselves, once we enter into a policy conversation, that all budgets are, in fact, moral documents. And all public policies reflect the values, the moral values and priorities of people having the conversation. I'll put that in the chat screen as well for us to think about. So our goal here at EMO, both tonight and in general, is not only to empower people of faith and goodwill and fierce love, as some of my friends say, with the advocacy tools they need to put their moral values into action, but to continue to learn how we can be better allies for all those communities that have been historically marginalized and alienated from the policy conversation. That's how we think of our goal this evening and in general. So tonight we're going to learn what that public moral conversation sounds like in Oregon right now in 2021, and how EMO and some of our deeply valued community partners hope to enter into that conversation and shape that conversation. We're going to be hearing insights, analysis, and key objectives from each of our speakers this evening, with the hopes that we might demystify the legislative process and give you the tools you need to participate, to lift up your stories in the public sphere, and hopefully offer and extend those tools to others in your community to do the same. That is how we are gathered here this evening. I'm going to stop talking so we can get into the meat of it by handing it over to our Director of Public Policy, Britt Conroy. Britt.
Thank you, Michael. If you don't mind, Michael, if you don't mind remaining host, and maybe I could let you know when the next slide I need would be really helpful. Is that, if you don't mind? That'd be great.
I actually don't have the slides up, just so you know. I think it's Aaron who has the slides.
All right. So welcome, everybody. I really appreciate, Aaron, I appreciate that help. So my name is Britt. Really, really fantastic to see 50 people on this call. Many of you I know well. I really, it's a real pleasure to spend a few minutes this evening with you, but especially with our guests. And before passing off to my guests, I just want to offer one final word on how EMO steps into this space. As every session, we look to make an impact, and we look to make an impact in our community, always with a lens in doing this work, always through the lens of racial justice. We approach this work in I think with kind of three overarching areas of focus. One is just recognizing that listening is an anti-racist act. EMO serves over 300,000 Oregonians every year in our direct service programs. And these individuals, as well as those who are in our member congregation, our supporters, are the source of so many of our policy initiatives, so much of our passion for this work and the direction we take this work comes from the very people that we are so lucky to serve and partner with. Also, there's a real, when you think about racial justice, we think about systemic change. For EMO, the systemic change lens is important in prioritizing our budget asks and our policy requests. How do we broaden the circle of compassion to include those previously left out? What programs or systems are currently explicitly excluding or otherizing? Right, the Oregonian that needs but is not eligible for the state support or who is ignored based on who they are is being blocked from full community membership. So changing our state budget, advancing legislation to redefine who counts in our society is a cultural and systemic reform work. And then finally, empowerment. It's not good enough to simply listen with or even stand alongside the marginalized in this state. What avenues can we provide for members of our BIPOC communities to step into advocacy work themselves? So we're now at the halfway point of the legislative session, and we wanted to sit down with everyone here and hear from community leaders, from leading advocates about the work that they are undertaking to ensure our state leads on racial justice. So first, let me introduce you to Nikita Daryanani, who serves as Climate and Energy Coordinator at the Coalition of Communities of Color. CCC is working to advance multiple environmental justice measures this session. And Aaron, if you can hit that slide, EMO is a proud member of the Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Coalition, which is pushing a package of bills. And I want to just highlight 3 bills really quickly as I pass it to Nikita. First, House Bill 2123, or House Bill 2021 with the 23 amendment, is the 100% Clean Energy for All bill. This is an incredibly exciting bill that would move Oregon step by step to net zero emitting electricity by 2040, just 19 years from now. It has strong labor standards. It invests $50 million in community-based renewable projects, and it moves us away from fossil fuel plants, including natural gas plants. Also, House Bill 2842, this is the Healthy Homes Bill, establishes a $20 million grant program for low-income and environmental justice communities at the Oregon Health Authority, improving air quality and making energy efficient upgrades to save families money and to save our environment through lower consumption. And finally, not listed here, is a House Bill 2475. This is an incredibly exciting bill that centers our BIPOC communities and other low-income Oregonians by ensuring that our communities pay differentiated rates for the utilities, for their utilities. So it recognizes that no family should be impoverished by their utility bills. No family should be disconnected from their water, their electricity, their natural gas because of inability to pay. We have to make these utilities more affordable. So with that, welcome, Nikita.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for that intro. I'm really excited to be here. Like Britt mentioned, my name is Nikita Daryanani. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Climate and Energy Policy Manager at the Coalition of Communities of Color. And CCC is a coalition made up of culturally specific community-based organizations, a couple of whom are co-panelists with me, actually. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Campaign in a bit, the 3 bills that Brent just walked us through. But before I do that, I wanted to talk generally about climate justice and racial justice and policy advocacy in this space. So climate justice and racial justice are deeply, inextricably intertwined, as we just learned. And all over the world, within our system of global capitalism, oppressed and marginalized groups are disproportionately impacted by toxic air and water pollution. And a lot of the statistics that Michael added in the chat really speak to that. And the destruction of cultural resources and sacred land, and the exclusion from decision-making around land use and energy and natural resources, to name a few. So I wanted to start with a story that I heard that demonstrates that. This was the first story that I heard that demonstrates this. So when I was younger. So Kettleman City is a small town right alongside Interstate 5 in Central California. So not in Oregon, but in Central California. And it's most commonly known as a place where you stop for food or for gas or to use the restroom when you're traveling along the 5 on your long drive between Northern and Southern California. And so Kettleman City is now home to a farm working population, many of whom are monolingual Spanish speakers, meaning they only speak Spanish. The community was also home to a chemical waste facility, and this was the largest hazardous waste landfill in the Western US. And the county decided to approve the expansion of the toxic waste dump in a community with the highest concentration of Latinx folks in the county. And the community had also been experiencing really high rates of birth defects and infant mortality that was unexplained. And the county specifically limited the residents from participating in the decision-making processes to approve the site by only providing notices and documents regarding the project in English, knowing that most of the community were Spanish speakers. So the community organized and filed a federal civil rights complaint and reached a settlement. But the point is, the story is really common, and you can almost exchange the community names and facility types and still be telling a true story somewhere else. And this was the first story I heard that demonstrated so clearly what environmental injustice is before I started working in this space. But like I said, there are so many other stories that outline the connection between pollution and race and class. And the Cully neighborhood in northeastern Portland, for example, is one of the city's most culturally diverse neighborhoods, made up of predominantly low-income households. The community is also highly polluted from nearby industrial operations that emit toxins into the air. Many of the organizations that CCC, my organization, partners with, including Verde and NAYA and Hacienda CDC, are all CCC member organizations and are based in Cully, have been working with community leaders in this neighborhood to craft solutions to the neighborhood's needs. And this is what so many stories of environmental racism and injustice have in common: powerful, grassroots, community-led organizing efforts to solve problems and advocate for better. So when I stay up at night worrying about the climate crisis, as I'm sure many of us in this Zoom call do, and its impact on the most vulnerable communities across the globe, it's the lessons that we learn about community power that give me hope. Because it's based on the idea that the people who are impacted the worst, which we call frontline communities, first and worst, then get to define what real meaningful solutions look like based on their needs and priorities, because they're the experts of their communities. A former director of mine used to hate the term, we were working together at another environmental justice nonprofit, but she used to hate the term empower when used in reference to the communities she worked with. So she would say, who are we as advocates to empower anyone? People already have the power. They're already empowered. They have voices. And she would prefer to use the term co-power, meaning working alongside frontline communities, elevating their stories and experiences, supporting their leadership, but ultimately following their lead. Another point about rhetoric that I'll add is people tend to say, when speaking about advocacy, that we have to give a voice to the voiceless, or we have to let those who don't have a voice speak up. But that's not true. People do have voices. They are empowered. It's a matter of elevating these stories, elevating this experience, and valuing it for what it is: community expertise. So I think many of us know that the environmental and conservationist movements in the US have historically been very dominated by white folks, and often fail to take into account the particular ways in which race and class determine outcomes relating to environmental health. Well, I have seen, and maybe we all have seen, a fundamental shift in this traditional approach over the last few years, maybe, or at least the beginning of an awakening to the importance of race, place, and socioeconomic status in environmental advocacy. I do think that the climate solutions that center the needs of frontline communities, that maximize benefits to environmental justice communities, and minimize burdens are the ones that will and must lead the way. So what might this look like in policy advocacy spaces? So for one thing, I think it might mean thinking about how environmental policy or a climate solution may impact communities on the front lines before you take a position on it. So employing a more holistic lens when considering policies. In my experience in climate justice advocacy, oftentimes mainstream environmental groups tend to be lasered focused on singular aspects of environmental degradation, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, for example. But I think if we're not considering associated harms to communities, for example, from co-pollutants, from technology that may have very low carbon intensity, but emit toxic air pollutants that impact human health or impact indigenous cultural resources and sacred land and land rights, we might be furthering harmful industries that are focused on increasing profits. So advocating alongside frontline communities may also mean yielding the floor to allow someone else to speak or to provide input, especially if that person is from the community that might be harmed or is a person of color or a woman or a femme, or making your comments quickly to allow more time for Black, Indigenous, or people of color to speak on a particular issue if time is limited. Or simply just listening, as I think Britt or Michael alluded to, listening to environmental justice communities on their concerns, their ideas, their needs, and their priorities. Again, these are the people who they're experts in their own communities. And the needs of environmental justice communities for clean energy, reduced energy bills, jobs, and community resilience in the face of climate disasters are what is at the center of the Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Campaign that was mentioned earlier. So my organization has been working with the statewide alliance of other organizations, and the campaign's 3 bills are included in EMO's legislative priorities, as the policy team mentioned earlier. The campaign is led by organizations throughout the state of Oregon, working directly with frontline communities, and was born out of years of advocacy and the clear, urgent need to build a more equitable energy system. And the coalition of organizations driving this campaigns are ones that work directly with communities of color or organizations that center racial justice and equity in their work. And the campaign has been really intentional to ensure that these organizations are centered in the work and make executive decisions around policy development and grassroots organizing. And then advocates, which are allied organizations like EMO, provide input and support the campaign. And as we mentioned, HB 2475, so this is the bill around energy affordability, addresses energy burden for low-income families. I think Britt mentioned that, I think many of us can agree that no one should have their energy cut off, and everyone should be able to afford energy bills, and no one should have to choose between energy, which is a necessity, and other necessities. The bill also provides funding for organizations that work directly with environmental justice communities to take part in regulatory proceedings that make decisions on aspects of the energy system that impact low-income communities of color. So having a seat at the table when decisions are being made is a core principle of environmental justice, and is something that is so often denied in systems and institutions that are upheld by white supremacy. Oftentimes those decisions are made without the folks who are impacted there making the decisions. So that's why I'm really excited about HB 2475, and then HB 2842, which is the Healthy Homes program that we talked about. This creates a program to help fund home upgrades and repairs. It specifically names environmental justice factors like high rent burden or areas with high unemployment, or areas affected by environmental pollution or other hazards, and high rates of low-income households as households that can be eligible for these programs or for these funds for these projects. And this funds things like lead abatement, radon abatement, fire hardening, installation of air purification systems in homes. I think the recent wildfires in Oregon really highlighted the very important need for folks to be safe from wildfire smoke inside their home as well. So this bill helps fund things like that are expensive, so low-income families can live in safe homes. So this, I think, is a great example of addressing public health through housing and centering environmental justice and directing benefits to those who need home repairs and upgrades the most, including low-income folks and folks of color. And then the third bill, HB 2021, which was 100% clean energy for all. As Britt mentioned, with the -23 amendment, there are many amendments up on OLIS. If you track bills through OLIS, the -3 amendment is the amendment that is supported by the campaign and is reflective of the coalition's advocacy. And this is really exciting because it lays out a clear vision for a clean energy future in Oregon that is built in a way that minimizes burdens to environmental justice communities and maximizes community benefits. It's also tied to increased job opportunities for marginalized communities and Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are not currently represented in the clean energy workforce. And the OCEO campaign, the Oregon Clean Energy Opportunity Campaign, OCEO, employs the holistic lens that I was talking about earlier. We have to approach solutions to climate change from all aspects that communities of color and low-income communities may benefit from or be burdened by, beyond environmental impact, but also jobs and disaster resilience, health and housing, protection of Indigenous land rights and cultural resources, reducing costs, increasing community wealth and investing in poor communities, providing access to decision-making processes, and so many others. So while the campaign, of course, will not transform our energy system to suddenly be a vehicle for racial and social justice, it does create opportunities for communities to benefit from a clean energy future that is already on its way. So it's a way that we can be first in making it equitable. And so we can all support efforts like this, as well as other grassroots-led policy proposals at the state level or local levels that are driven and led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and utilize the skills and resources and access that we may have to maybe technical assistance or to decision makers, to uplift, amplify, and elevate low-income frontline communities of color instead of speaking over them or interrupting or devaluing their knowledge or expertise. I don't have all the answers, but I do think that this approach is critical and absolutely necessary to advancing solutions to climate change in a really just way, a racially just way, racially and economically and environmentally just way. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Nikita. Applause for Nikita. Really appreciate being here tonight and for the work you do and for how you do it. And I also appreciate, on a personal note, the comment from your supervisors in the past about how to think differently about the term empower. I think that's really important and really powerful point. So thank you. Appreciate that. So much of the passion for climate, environmental justice work comes from our desire to leave a just, habitable, opportunity-rich Earth for our children and youth. And EMO has partnered with many organizations on a range of other youth-focused bills, including legislation to fund culturally responsive housing and mental health supports for youth who are houseless and separated from their families or unaccompanied houseless youth. So Miranda Mishan is the Housing and Economic Development Policy Coordinator at NAYA, the Native American Youth Association. And together with other groups, we partnered to draft and advance House Bill 2544, which would provide housing and mental health supports for over 1,500 houseless youth in the next 2 years. These, I hate to say, are and have been some of the forgotten youth of our state. Oregon has the highest rate of youth homelessness, K-12 homelessness in the United States. These numbers that you see in front of you, 3,700 unaccompanied houseless youth, are dated, and the number is higher. And it may come as no surprise that that nationally, youth of color represent a majority of youth who are experiencing homelessness and are separated from their families, with Black or African American youth representing more than 1 in 3 houseless youth in this country. You know, right now the Oregon Department of Human Services is undertaking a study to understand understand kind of the demographic breakdown and the needs of houseless youth here in Oregon. And initial results for that are coming out just next week, that I think will help inform, we hope will help inform what the legislature does on this front moving forward. So to speak about this $4.4 million investment in over 1,500 houseless youth, again, I want to welcome Miranda.
Thank you, Britt. Thank you everyone for having me. Thanks, Nikita. I really enjoyed hearing about the work that you're doing around environmental justice as well. Like Britt said, my name is Miranda Mishan. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Housing and Economic Development Policy Coordinator at the NAYA Family Center. So just, I'm going to talk a little bit about really briefly what we do at NAYA, a little bit about how we're addressing this issue of homeless youth, and then just in general talk about what we see as our priorities in addressing the housing crisis and homelessness, how I see them as connected, and how I use that to kind of move some of our policy and advocacy efforts forward. So NAYA is a wraparound service agency. We serve roughly 2,000 individuals and impact the lives of about 10,000 individuals in the region throughout the year. We serve anyone that walks through our door, but our priority focus is the Native American community in Portland and Multnomah County. We have services for youth of all ages and a wide array of family services as well, in addition to elder services. We offer a range of health, education, housing, economic development, and community support programs. NAYA is really a gathering place for the Native community in Portland. We're located in the Cully neighborhood on the Columbia River Slough. So Native Americans experience homelessness at a higher rate than other demographics. And even as this rate drops, or tends to drop for other groups over time, Native homelessness is kind of on a steady increase. This statistic is reflected nationally as well as in the state of Oregon. As you saw just a second ago, on a national level, 51% of homeless youth are youth of color. So of course, providing access to affordable and stable housing and addressing homelessness, both adult and youth homelessness, are two huge priorities for NAYA. And given that youth homelessness is the #1 indicator for adult homelessness, addressing youth homelessness is right up there with our priorities. So it's really exciting to kind of see policy conversations at the state level that call out culturally specific organizations. And House Bill 2554, which is that $4.4 million in grants to establish host home programs throughout the state, is one of those pieces of legislation that acknowledges culturally specific organizations as a potential grantee for those funds that provide host home services to unaccompanied homeless youth. It's really exciting to start to see legislation go beyond and making funding, concrete funding allocations to allocate towards that culturally responsive work. So we know that homelessness is a systemic issue. And we also acknowledge that racism is a systemic issue. I feel like those are like the two starting points for me when kind of thinking about this advocacy work. And then in doing this work, we really need to realize that they're part of the same system, right? Or it's all one system. And if we're going to address homelessness, we really need to do so through a racial justice lens that acknowledges and uplifts intergenerational trauma, systemic oppression, and disenfranchisement. Culturally responsive organizations like NAYA are the best at doing this work. We have the knowledge and the relationships to respond to issues that affect our communities the most, and homelessness, like I mentioned, is really one of those issues. But so often we don't have the staff capacity, the capacity in general to effectively tackle these issues, and that's partly because the problems are so dire and there is so much need in our community. Like I've already highlighted. And it's also just really difficult to find the people that can do the work. It's difficult work, right? And so that's why We really feel it's important to make these investments at the state, local, every level in culturally specific organizations. Making these deliberate investments make it possible to expand programming, reach more youth in our unaccompanied homeless youth work, and build on tools that we already know are effective. And that's what's really exciting about House Bill 2554 is that it really builds on this host-home model that has proven effectiveness and expands the services that organizations are already providing and just allows them to reach more youth and hopefully reach more youth of color in their work. So like I said, NAYA is a wraparound agency. We see all of our programs and services as overlapping and feeding into one another. Youth homeless prevention also informs our housing and family reunification work as we work to keep families together, keep them housed and in stable and affordable housing. Through successful partnerships, we've been able to access funding that allows us to actually prioritize Native American tribal members during the lease-up process of our affordable housing developments. Last year, we opened our first tribal preference property in the Cully neighborhood, and we just did groundbreaking on our next one in the Cully neighborhood. So we're really working to bring folks together, create those partnerships that allow us to bring Native people back as families together in stable and affordable housing in the Cully neighborhood. So we are also able to provide addiction prevention services, and we have plans to provide business technical assistance services at those properties. And those are also culturally responsive services that address some of the issues that I talked about in terms of disenfranchisement, intergenerational trauma, and really create long-lasting prosperity in those communities by building access to capital, by keeping folks sober and in that safe and stable housing. Our staff really have the knowledge and the lived experience to provide these services through that culturally responsive lens and to support our communities in breaking those cycles of trauma and those cycles of systemic disenfranchisement. This continuum of services really supports our vision, like I said, of a thriving, prosperous Native community in Portland and Multnomah County. And it's really made possible by bringing the lived experiences and the needs of Native American community to the center of our work in our housing and homelessness prevention. So it's really key that we translate that to our work at the state level. And in my advocacy trainings that I provide for our community members, I really encourage folks to speak from that space of lived experience, to approach it in an authentic and genuine way, and just acknowledge that that experience is becoming more and more valuable to folks as we try to address some of the needs through this lens of racial justice. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you again so much for having me tonight.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you to Miranda from everybody, please. Really appreciate your time and being here and your partnership. Quite a long time now. Really appreciate it. And as Nikita is posting in the chat there, NAYA of course has also been a key player in the OCO Coalition advancing climate legislation. So it's just a treat to get to work with you folks on multiple issues. So I transition to our next guest. So by saying that NAYA and Miranda is a leading advocacy organization because advocates there listen to the needs of their communities and respond with dynamic programs and truly effective client and community-centered lobbying. And our next guest, Frances Kham, does the same as a community education worker at Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, IRCO, and as a community organizer with EMO. What he hears from the refugee community is the need for access to supports for members of this refugee community to build their new lives. And Senate Bill 718 is the renewal and expansion of the Welcoming Refugees Act, which was passed in 2019. Its goal is to expand access to important services to not just those who live in the metro area as the state currently does, but to increase the number of individuals in the metro area who access these services and to expand these services to other significantly sized refugee populations across the state, in Ontario, in Lane County, in the greater Salem area. And it's an effort that serves not just refugees, but also those who act as interpreters alongside American Armed Forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, as asylees, as survivors of human trafficking, and others. Enrolling people in the Oregon Health Plan, connecting them to employment, connecting them during this pandemic to unemployment, to an unemployment system that has been unruly for any of us, let alone for a newly arrived refugee family, and on and on. So with that, I want to turn it over to Francis to talk a little bit about his work.
Hi, Britt, thank you for your introduction and thank you for having me here. And I really appreciate meeting all of you here this evening. And I hope I can give you some kind of like background for you tonight. Before I start that, as Britt mentioned, that I'm a community education worker at IRCO, and that is my first job since I arrived to US in 2015. So I also the leader of the faith-based refugee community organization, which is Zomi Catholic community here in East Portland. And also I work as a full-time social worker at IRCO, and also I also part of the volunteer board member of Catholic Charities of Oregon. So, and right now I have 3 kids, 3 children, and there are 3, the youngest is 2, 4, 6. So I'm father of 3 children. I'm very blessed. I received blessing from God. And prior to that, I'm still a refugee, and I'm transitioning to becoming a U.S. citizen, apply the citizenship of the United States. And I would like to share the background history, as you all have. All of us have a different story, but my story would be, I am refugees from Malaysia, from Myanmar, and which is also known as Burma. And which is, if you don't know, Burma is located between China and India, which is a tiny country, but most of you might know if you are looking for the international news right now. The Burmese military has been taking over the country from the democratic leader, which is, you can see this is the real country leader, but she is now in jail. So right now the military is in charge, Kabla in charge. So I'm Zomi, and we have 7 major ethnic groups from Burma, and Zomi is one of the small ethnic group, and I am not identified as Burmese. So Burmese are the majority people. And also I am a Catholic, and because of the French missionaries who planted the seed in the Northern Chin Hills in 1939. But the spoken language that I'm speaking, my mother tongue is Zomi, was brought into the Zomi community was from the American Baptist missionaries. So they came to my area, and they brought the Christianity in around 1900. So they created the Zomi language, the Zomi literature. That is how we can communicate and we can write. We have the Zomi literature from the American Baptist missionaries. And today, if the United States did not take the refugee resettlement program, I would not be here meeting with all of you and not be able to speak in front of you today. This is the blessing from you, and we knew that America is the nation of milk and honey, and which means to us that the country that received a blessing from God. And we also knew that the United States is the second heaven and earth, and it is the country that helps vulnerable people and protects their lives. Of course, the Christian churches, the Catholic Church does this too. There are values that we have kept in our mind and gave us hope from the people of America. We know that about we don't know about high technology, especially when I was in a refugee camp in Malaysia. We don't care who had what, but that we treasure how American people value others and others people's life. And my story begins in a lot of trauma back home. I fled my country in 2006 because of the political suppression and persecution of the Christian minority. That is why God is the most important thing part in refugees, those who are from, especially from my area, which is the northern Chin Hill. And apart from that, one of my brothers, Paul, he is a smart guy, wanted to be, he is from one of the kind of like leader from the Zomi people back home in Burma, and he was in a college, second year. He got arrested by the military government. At that time, the military was in charge as well. So my family nightmare started then, and the authorities kept watch on us, what we do every day without any reason. And my brother, an innocent man, he was released from the jail after 6 years of extremely hard labor. But he was asked to report to authorities as every week what he does, who he met, and all those things he has to report. But we don't know when he's gonna get arrested, and the kind of situation that we live in. And he fear, and my family members fear that it's kind of part of the ethnic cleansing that happened back home there. And also he had no choice, and right after that he had to run away from our home, and before the worst come next. As his siblings, we were in danger too, and we had to get out from Burma as soon as possible to avoid the arrest from the military. I stayed in the jungle refugee camp in Malaysia for 2 years. I was so scared to leave the jungle, because the Malaysian government, they identify the people who are seeking for protection. They use at illegal people. So I was so scared at the time, and the police and any uniformed people might arrest me at the time. So we just stay in the jungle for 2 years. Unfortunately, I tried to avoid the people, but I did get arrested in 2008, and not having the legal document, with about 80 other people. And I spent the time sometimes in the detention center, and it's a very cramped in the detention center. And there was a problem that happened in the within the camp. There was a problem within the people and the authority. So we were part of that problems, and I was rearrested in the camp itself. And because of there was a riot happened in the camp due to unwanted treatment because of by the authorities. So I was rearrested within the camp and sent to the police station and all those because of the riot. The camp, the detention center was burned down, and the authority are very angry with all of us. And I was part of the problems which they accused me. So I got rearrested from there and sent back to the police station. And it was about the riot that I was accused as a leader. So after that, they took me my statements, and everything went well. And after that, I was about to go out from the police station, but since I don't have any document, so they cannot release from the police station, but they have to deport me back to the border, which is Thailand. So I was deported to the Thailand border, and it's what I know, and what I knew was that the authority, the immigration authority from Malaysia, they sold me, and they sold me to the human trafficker. At that time, it's about equivalent to $150 in US currency. And that is why the human traffickers, they asked me if you have any relatives or friends or anyone can pay you about $1,300 US to able to release from the human traffickers. So I call one of my Christian friend. His name is Chris, and he looked for money, and he gave the human trafficker about 1,300 to release me from the human traffickers. So they really, after paying the 1,300,000, so they released me from the, I was released from the human trafficker, and I came back to Malaysia to seek for the protection. So I came back to Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and work as a refugee, work at the refugee schools. And as I mentioned earlier, refugees are not recognized, and the children are not allowed to go to public school. And I was helping the families as well as the advocacy work for the refugees community itself. So I was part of the setting up the refugee learning center in Malaysia, and also what do you call that, teachers, but they are not professional teachers, but just come out from the volunteer within the community, and they become kind of like teachers. So we train the UNHCR and the one that I work, a non-profit organization, we train refugees leaders to become teachers. So I worked there for about 8 years. And after that, waiting for my turn to come to US, after waiting for 8 years, I have registered for UNHCR refugee status, and I waited to come to US for 8 years. So I came to US in 2015, and of course, through Catholic Charity, and I received the, we call it a welcome money, and their agency helped me to apply for the public assistance for rent and all those, and they helped me to rent a house, and also before I arrive in, they provide, they get ready for me to move into the house. So, and also it was about 9 months. They can help me and my family for 9 months, but which is very short. And also I have to get a job in order to support my family. So I get a job right after I arrived. I think 2 months I get a job at IRCO, and since then I work at IRCO. So the 9 months period of time is very short time, and I have even my wife and my kids, they don't know anything at all. Without me, they cannot go out. So I have to get a job, and the case, they say after I get a job, the case is kind of like similar to close, and there is no more connection with my kids and wife to the resettlement agency due to the case was closed. So I feel that it is a very short time of period, and for me, I am blessed that I can speak English better than other people within my community, and that's how I feel kind of like I'm relieved compared to other people. But imagine those who doesn't speak or read a word of English, they have a very difficulties to in another country like US, which totally different culture, totally everything is upside down where we come from. So I would like to let you know that if Britt mentioned that the welcoming bills would be a very good to support, and especially for the newly arrived refugees like myself. And also I would the food, shelter, and my family basic needs that we receive from the resettlement agency after arrival here in US, but we are not really ready to settle within the 9 months, because we have to go this appointment and that appointment within the 9 months, especially the lot of appointment within the 9 months. So after that, we are kind of like refugees are ready to integrate into the next chapter, but which is, they said, oh, your case is closed, so we cannot help you because we don't, the agency, they don't have money to run for after 9 months period of time. So that is why we are kind of like hopeless or helpless after 9 months period of time. So as we come to US as a refugee, we are very grateful that what you have been given to us to start a new life. On the other hand, you welcome us with open arms, and we want nothing from you want nothing from us, and just giving us what we need. And this is very important for us, that refugees and immigrants, even the asylees, those are very important to us. And majority of refugees have no able to adapt the culture, the system, and many other things. Without the help, without the support from the resettlement agency, such as the Catholic Charity, IMO is, and we call it SOAR, but part of IMO, and also IRCO and Lutheran, we will not be able to kind of like start a new life or to build a new life. So I can imagine how much hardship, difficulties we are going to face without these resettlement agency help. The direct service provider, even just one smile, I said one smile at our doorstep means a lot to us. So basically, when we come to US, the resettlement agency are the first people that we met in US, and they are the person that we trust because they help, they feed us. So they are the very first people that we trust. So, but we have to just stop trusting them, or we are forced to trust them after 9 months. So there's a lot of problems after we cut off from the resettlement agency, especially in my community, refugees communities. And there will be more families coming into Portland or relocating to Portland if these such a wonderful bills, welcome bills is passed. And this is because of you, and you have give us hope and faith. When refugees know about you and us, people love to come here, especially in Portland, to settle here. But we don't know each other, but the grace of God, we know we bring in people here from another state, or refugees from Malaysia, Thailand, India, all different parts of the world, they come to Oregon. And after I worked with the IRCO, I got I am kind of like surviving for after 3 months. Kind of like I started learning in the US systems and all those and different things I learned from work, or I learned from different people, and I met a lot of people through the past 5 years. But what I mentioned, I'm blessed to be able to connect like different people. And after 4 years, like I think 3.5 years, the Catholic Charity invited me to be the board member. So that's how I build trust with the within the community, as well as I try to myself to integrate into the system as much as possible. So after that, most refugees have, after 9 months period of time, they have very limited resources available for their family, especially from the person or the agency that they trusted when they come to US, which is the resettlement agency. Of course, it would be great if the welcome bill is passed and the case management or different thing, it would be only kind of like what most refugees, especially like us, like me, we would like to, or we want to work with the person or the people that we trust. It is very important. The trust building is very important. So I would like to mention that as refugees are here not to harm anyone, but of course we pay also what American does. Your tax money give us hope and faith and life. It was wisely and meaningfully spent when you invest to the refugees' families around the world. And it is kind of like investment, life investment. We are in this country, but as I mentioned, we are not to harm anyone, but journey together to build a better tomorrow. And I would strongly ask the legislator and ask their support for refugee services to that impact many more lives in the futures, to be able to open their doors and would contribute to the success of Oregon and the people's success as well. And we can save a lot of future humanity, different parts of the world, not only the refugees, of course, immigration and asylees yet to come in the futures as well. And I would particularly mention about after I arrived, 3 days after I came to US, and it is in Portland, I entered to my church and I arrived the church door and I saw the sign that said, "You are loved," which is very, very meaningful, and kind of like I feel very, very welcome to part of the faith-based community, especially like today our MC Charlie's mentioned about we are a different part of the faith, and we are kind of like what she mentioned is that love your neighbors yourself. So I'm very, very happy about and how the church welcomes the Christian faith, the faith welcomes refugees. And we are here to seek love for so long, but the real love is that comes from God and God people, especially these kind of like, you all are the God's people, and the God's people, you receive the God's love and you share to us and many more refugees in the future. And thank you, all of you here.
Thank you, Francis. Really appreciate you being with us tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you to Francis, please. Francis is a gift to Portland and to Oregon. Really appreciate your partnership. Francis talked about Senate Bill 718 in this legislative session, and that's a renewal and expansion of the Welcoming Refugees Bill from 2019, which our final guest voted for. Senator Lou Frederick represents District 22 in North and Northeast Portland and has been a leader and a gracious partner of EMO on youth homelessness, immigration, education, and many other issues. And tonight we've asked him to speak to the historic police accountability bills that are making their way through the legislature. There are many such bills, three of which just to highlight here: a bill to restrict police use of weapons, a bill that will create a health response to a mental health crisis instead of a police response, and legislation to hold police officers accountable for misconduct. So with that, Senator Frederick, really appreciate so much of your time tonight, and turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. And for some reason, my screen went blank. There we are. Okay. I don't have you can keep up the list there if you'd like. Thank you again for the support and the chance to talk with folks. I think it's it's important. At the beginning, you started talking about how people can be effective regarding the legislature. And I think what I would like to say is that those police accountability bills are not there just because one person decided to do something. We have 12 members of the BIPOC caucus now in the legislature. When I started, there was just myself as the only black man in the legislature at the time, and then Jackie Winters over in the Senate as well. The two of us were there, and I used to joke that whenever I walked over to see her in the Senate, the whole Capitol tilted a little bit. But the fact is, now we have 12 folks. We have 9 in the House, 9 people of color in the House, and 3 black senators in the Oregon Senate. And we've been able to bring forward a number of bills, not bills that not just the ones that are very popular headline bills, but things like the bills that we brought forward related to today. Senator Manning had a bill that looks at procurement and contracts for state contracts and county contracts related to making sure that people of color have the chance to be part of the bidding for it and to be actually get a chance to really work on those contracts at a particular level. Now that's not an earth-shattering bill, but it will make a huge difference statewide. We've also passed bills related to the bias issues. Folks who are out in the forests and the rivers of Oregon are now we believe once it passes the House, and I think it will pass the House, we'll find that they if somebody starts bothering them, because of their race or their ethnicity or LGBTQ status, that those folks can find themselves without access to those forests if they're doing that kind of thing. So we have a number of bills that have been going on. I mean, there's just truly a long list. The number of bills that the BIPOC caucus initiated, I think we had somewhere on the order of 40 to 50 bills that were initiated at the beginning of the session. They are all not going to go through. But the reason that they're not all going to go through is not because of any sort of anyone slacking off. It's just a matter of how you can get the support and how things work in the legislature. Now, our legislative session has been is very different than it has been in the past. We are only the legislators and some staff members are allowed in the building after you've had your shots and whatever, and everyone still tries to keep a 6-foot distance generally as we're walking around the building. And so there's no committee meetings in person, but there are committee meetings online. So as you look at these bills, I encourage you to find a way to find out when they are being discussed and where, and join the testimony if possible online for that. Easy way to do that. Very easy way to do that. It's called OLIS, O-L-I-S. If you Google OLIS, it's Oregon Legislative Information System. You can find out about a bill. You can find out about what committee it's in, what the history of the bill is so far. You can find out the amendments that have been passed and the amendments that have been proposed. And you can look at the history, the way that particular bill has worked its way through the system at this particular point, and where it's going next. You can find out when it's going to be heard on the floor, when it's going to be heard in the in committee. At this point, if a bill had started at the beginning in January and was introduced, if it's not has not passed either the House or the Senate at this point, it's very likely not going to pass. Now, there are bills, however, that have not passed the House or the Senate, but are in the Rules Committee in either the House or the Senate, or in the Ways and Means subcommittees or committee, or in the capital construction committees and things like that. So there are committees that give some slack on that, but we're coming to the end. We're more than halfway through the session. We're supposed to end at the end of June. So we're still moving along. So I would encourage you to look at OLIS, find out where you can insert your opinions, your concerns, if possible. In public hearings, you want to look for the public hearings on when you can send something in if they have not already taken place. If they've already taken place, then you want to talk with your legislator. You want to talk with or send a note, a letter, an email, and don't send a form letter. Don't click on change.org or change.com or whatever and send a form letter about a particular bill, because quite frankly, we get so many of those that our email system often just kicks in and puts them as spam because they end up being the same language. It's not something that someone has actually thought about. It's just the easy way of just clicking on something. So try to if you're going to write an email, write a personal email to the legislator that you want to talk with, and try to get it individually to folks, because we get so many things that are frankly computer generated rather than from people, and an information, something coming from a particular person makes a huge difference in how people deal with issues. So that's part of my message. I want to put another bit of message in here too. I want you to recognize that we do live in a political environment, and as a result, it is important for you to take on something that you can wrap your arms around and work with, and that can be all sorts of things. It can be the environmental issues, it can be the housing issues, it can be the education issues or healthcare, But there's also a strategy to try to make sure that you don't get much information or you aren't successful. And often that strategy involves things like getting people exhausted, getting people distracted, making folks as cynical as possible about what's going on in the community, what's going on in politics. And that is an old strategy, which is a divide and conquer that you also see taking place. So I would encourage you to recognize that, to try not to drop into those traps. Those traps are there. They're intentionally set for folks to get so exhausted fighting one thing so that folks can be obscured by the other things that people are trying to do. So we're trying to avoid that. We have all sorts of I call it kabuki theater, but we have all sorts of theater taking place where folks are setting up to not come to work in the legislature, not so that we can't get a quorum, yell about something that really isn't very important, but it gets the attention because people are yelling or people are concerned about things while you're not getting some of the work done regarding housing or education or healthcare or police accountability. And we have been lucky enough, because of the 12 folks involved in the BIPOC caucus, especially the 12 folks, we have been able to get some bills through the legislative session in ways that I never expected. Well, I can't say never expected, but I am so pleased to see after what we've worked with. I've worked on some of these bills since 2010, not getting across some of the issues, but because of the national scene, because of what we saw with the George Floyd murder, because of the video that we've seen of other incidents and other things like that, it is very clear that people want to see a change. They want to feel safe, and that's been the message that's come out from me and from the BIPOC caucus. So I can talk for too long, and I'm sorry I probably already have, but I wanted to just give you a sense that you can be effective. It's just a matter of picking where you want to be effective.
Thank you, Senator. Really appreciate your time as always, and thank you for your evening with us. A segue from Senator's remarks about how to be effective, I want to show you two quick examples of how to do so before we wrap up tonight. The first is that less than a month from now, Innovative Advocacy is on May 25th. This is a fantastic, in this year, virtual gathering of people of faith from across the state. In the morning, we'll have a couple of hours of training and workshops to dig into the issues that you care about, workshops that you choose. In the afternoon, after your lunch at home, you log back on for a 15-minute meeting with a group of other folks from your own neighborhood, from your own communities, to meet with your legislators. This is a tremendous event that is truly interfaith, that just a few years ago had 500 people in attendance, and we're excited to make this event accessible to people across the state. No longer have to drive to Salem, but rather engage with your legislator directly. I also wanted to show you, we're also going to be sending in a follow-up email a link with more information about the bills. It's called through a program that enables you to send personalized emails or make personalized phone calls to your legislators. For those of you who are a little bit, so it's there in the chat. For those of you who are that's the Interfaith Advocacy registration. Thank you for that in the chat there, Street. For those who are hesitant about making phone calls to your legislator, I recommend the midnight phone call where no one will pick up, and where you can mention who you are and what you care about. If so, this is a link that you'll have in your email, and it has a sample script. Right as you see in the box in the upper right, you can find your local representative by simply typing in your address, and then get on and talk about one of the bills on the left or one of your own priorities, and why, and be sure to add why perhaps as a person of faith, or why it is that you care about these issues. And then fill out this form to let us know how the call went. And if you end up calling during the day and talking to folks, it's great to get feedback on how it went. So I'm tempted to model this for you right now and leave a message for my state senator and state representative, but we urge you to do that. This is a simple way to get involved and to maybe do it with your kids or with another family member or friend. So with that, I want to turn it back over to my colleagues to wrap up our evening.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists for being willing to be here and share with us tonight. It was amazing to hear all of your stories and your entry points into the good work that you're doing and the great legislation that is out there that we get to be able to advocate about together this season, as well as hopefully that we will see implemented in the coming years. So thank you so much to panelists for your time, for being here tonight, and for sharing with us about these things that you're really passionate about and doing such amazing work about. We really appreciate it. So as Britt said, we have some ways to get involved that are coming up. So we have Interfaith Advocacy Day. Several of you are here for our, because you know about our Creation Justice Advocacy team. So feel free to look for that as well. If you don't know about it, you can contact me and I will let you know more than you ever wanted to know about that Creation Justice Advocacy team. But I did want to just highlight something that Britt just said, which is that if you do these calls to your legislators and you leave a message, it actually does make a really big difference. We were doing Earth Week advocacy last week, and one of the legislators, actually their aide, mentioned that they remembered one of the constituents that was on the call calling with their children, and so the legislator had said, "Hey, everybody, come listen to this message." And so they actually remembered this call and this person, this particular constituent, because they had made this call creatively with their kids and made it really memorable. And so that's something that you can think about doing as well. So we're not going to be able to take time to do that together tonight, but we encourage you to call your legislators about one or all of these issues if you would like to, even if you wouldn't like to, if it scares you and it's not something that you're familiar with. We hope that you'll take that chance in the future and maybe do that right after this session, and call your legislator and talk to them about these really important bills. Like Britt said, we'll send all this to you in an email later on, but also if you want to take a chance to do that tonight after this meeting is over, feel free to do that. So that is there. It lists all the bills that we just talked about. It gives you a little script for what to do and what to say when you leave a message for your legislator. And so it makes it really easy for you, hopefully. So you can use that and then also let us know that you called with the link that we just shared. So thank you for being willing to take this time to be with us. I wonder if you would share in the chat really fast, what is one action that you're planning on taking after this meeting to follow up on one of the bills that you heard about and learned about tonight? So think about that for a moment. What is one of these bills or one of these issues that you're going to commit to taking action on, and what is that action going to look like? So think about that for a moment and write a few words in a chat just as a way to hold yourself accountable to take action after this meeting. So informing your faith community about all of these issues and bills, making calls about police accountability and refugee support, calling Senator and Representative to support HB 2544, calling legislators and encouraging friends and family. Yeah, it's important to not just talk to legislators, but also see if you can multiply your efforts by talking to your friends and family and getting them also to call and take action. Passing the word, you already have postcards with postage, that's great. Phone call in support of House Bill 2544. Find out who represents your area. Yeah, that's important. If one of my coworkers could put the Find Your Legislator link into the chat, that would be helpful as well. appreciate learning more about the funding for legislative action to alleviate youth houselessness. You're going to make calls. Great. Registered for Interfaith Advocacy Day. Yay, that's what we like to hear. Calling your Oregon senator. Looking into welcoming refugees bill. Great, so many wonderful actions, and we're excited that you are taking that initiative to take action after this call, and we look forward to hearing from you more on these things. The Creation Justice Advocacy team will be continuing to meet with legislators in the next month, or particularly our federal legislators, and then we'll be joining Interfaith Advocacy Day on May 25th to speak about all of these issues, including climate and environmental issues. So that's the way that we can all take action together about all of these important issues. So one more time, thank you. Thank you so much for all of our panelists and for the people who have joined this call and taken time out of their evenings to be with us. And I'm going to pass it over to Michael Alec to close our time together.
Thanks, Sharice. And we've already said that we're going to share more with you by email. So a lot of you asked privately if you could have the names again and agencies of all of our guest speakers. We will include that in a follow-up email that has all the other links and scripts. And just as an organizer, the only thing I would add is, like, you can do this yourself tonight, just so you make sure you get it done. But then invite your family members and your friends and your church members. I think the first time someone calls and realizes that their voice does have power, that they can just call up their legislator, that it changes their perception of the process. And that's something we really hope for you and for you to give others in your faith community, so your voice is part of it. We're going to close with prayer so that we try to end right on time. And thank you again all so much. Let's pray. Gracious God, we ask for the spirit of compassion and empathy and wisdom to infuse not just us, but those around us and our legislators, our lawmakers. Today, in this work, in the details and the gristle and the policy and the numbers, may we see your greater vision of the world, the greater vision of what we are. And as we call, as we write, as we advocate, as we make space for others to do the same, may we in this see what we have always been. May those around us see what they have always been. And may we come together in our understanding. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.